Hi, Chris. Hi, Mark.
Hey Pete, how are you?
Oh, good. I'm glad you said something. I wasn't sure if my sound was working.
Yeah, I had myself muted.
I
Sorry,
just finished logging in, so I wasn't sure if anything was working.
I was trying to set up our YouTube streaming, so I apologize.
Looks like it got set up, so great. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Pete. Hello, all.
Hello.
Okay, so we just need Gus.
Boy, the real estate's getting grabbed up around you, Mike. The signs barely go up and the next day.
I know. Well, the house across the street they've been trying to sell it for like 4 years and they seem to have succeeded. So it's good they don't have enough time to do diligence on their neighbors. It would be bad for the sellers. If they knew what they were in for and how early my kids got up, it might not be, it might not sell quite so quickly. Although the Tresca trucks and all the trucks on the 109 kind of drowned us out mostly. So
The one next to the gas station went really fast.
yeah.
We're just waiting for Gus.
He's calling in from parts unknown, right? Isn't he?
He is. We'll give him a. Pete, why don't you start reading the proclamation at least, and then we can hope he
Okay.
joins in the meantime.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the, what is it? March 16, 2021 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Medfield Select Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the board will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen or view this meeting while in progress may do so by following the instructions on the agenda and meeting notice. All votes subject to remote participation, therefore will be roll call votes. Present and accounted for are select board members Michael Marcucci and Osler Peterson. Soon to appear will be Gustav Murby. And we'll start by reminding everybody that we're being recorded so that they'll be recorded. And let's take a moment of appreciation for our troops who are serving around the globe. Thank you.
And of course, we won't know if Gus is participating remotely until he gets here. So you might want to be sure to announce that when he actually arrives so people know that he's not in the room with either of us.
Yeah, I'm gonna text him real quick.
Should we take up the stuff he's likely to have a problem with and get it all get it all approved before he shows up?
Let's appoint him to some committees.
I suspect, Pete, we could probably start with the first two items on the agenda.
I think so. I'm gonna promote.
Sure.
this
Okay.
now. Let me just get Kim over.
Okay. Thank you. Kim Price and Janie Bolin to request rolling rally and outdoor celebration for the 2021 high school graduates on Saturday, June 5, 2021.
And
Hey, guys. Oh, Janie, what a nice picture.
the chief is here as well to discuss it.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So who's going to start? Kim?
I'm going to start.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having us tonight. I know you guys
Thank
are
you for
very
coming.
busy. So Janie Boylan and I are the co-chairs for the all-night grad party, and we're going to need to mix things up again this year to make sure the class of 2021 really gets the celebration they deserve this year. Last year, the rolling rally was a huge success. In fact, many people said that COVID or no COVID, it should be done every year. It's a great way for the entire town to celebrate our seniors' achievements and volunteerism over the years. Now that people know what it's all about, we think there will be more community involvement with people along the route, joining in on decorating and cheering everybody as well. The parents of the seniors loved being involved and seeing the town come together to celebrate their child, which was fantastic. There were many parents crying tears of joy and happiness throughout the entire route. I remember seeing a student that I was close to through theater, and he was a kid that didn't smile much and didn't, have a lot of fun with things. And at the end of the route, I saw him and he had the biggest smile on his face that I ever saw. And that's what, makes everything worth it, I think. Janie and I have been in discussion with the chief about shortening the route this year and having a new starting point possibly. Janie is going to discuss the route shortly. We're also planning on ending the rally at Blake Middle School and having a 3-hour reimagined all-night grad party. Can't really be called an all-night grad party, but that's what we're going to keep calling it. It's going to be held at the baseball field. We have permission from Eric Scott, the athletic director, to use the field, and Robert Parga, Jeff Sperling, Heather Mendoza are all on board as well. And once we have approvals, we'll work closely with the Board of Health to follow all COVID protocols. Our plan is to have some giant games for the kids to play. We might even bring out some Winter Carnival old games for a little trip down memory lane. But we'll be able to easily wipe them down after each use. We'll have some food trucks and a DJ. The kids just really want to be together, and we want to be able to give them that. We're thinking a lot of kids will just be sitting around on blankets and 3 feet apart, masks on, all that good stuff. So yes, we'd like to have the rolling rally and a party on Saturday, June 5th. It's the day before graduation. Likely start time of 1 p.m., but we'll see what works best for everyone. And from there, I'll give it on to Janie.
Thank you, Kim. So as Kim mentioned, we obviously, because we're not in total shutdown as we were this time last year, we have to appreciate that elements of the town will still be continuing along their business. So obviously, Kevin Ryder is going to be having his kindergarten soccer and outdoor sports. So the McCarthy Park was out of bounds for us as a starting point. So we've been working, thankfully, with Chief Garrett, and she has come up with a great idea of potentially starting at the DPW, where we can hopefully line up 200 cars and then get onto Dale Street, go up along Adam Street so that they can loop past Memorial, back again along Dale, and then go down North Street, across Main Street and towards Blake Middle School. As Kim highlighted, we would like to have this outdoor all-night grad 3-hour long party. And we hope that you're able to grant us permission with this, working obviously very closely with the Board of Health and the Chief of Police and any others that we need to work with to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm disappointed you won't go by my house this year, but Chief, do you have any input for us on this?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I apologize. I'm dialing in as I am doing some hands-free driving right now, so being very safe and responsible.
Thank you for joining us.
We did have to make some adjustments. Obviously, I would have loved to have used McCarthy Fields again because it's a footprint that we have now tested and could refine a bit, but unfortunately they're just unable to accommodate us. So with immense cooperation from Mo Goulet over at DPW, we spoke today, and we are going to move some trucks and some other equipment that's there, and we should be able to accommodate approximately 200 cars. I think it gives us a nice access point to go right by Dale Street and loop around and hit the schools while remaining with the one pass through the center of town. If we had used any other area coming from maybe Wheelock or another school, we would have had to do 2 passes in town, and that is not ideal for traffic. As far as the route itself goes, I am working closely with them, and I'm confident we can provide an escort to get everybody to and from safely. The all-night party, which is 3 hours, we will provide a detail for, and we've been in some talks about limiting access points in and out so that we can ensure that everybody's kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing. And obviously we'll defer to the Board of Health for whatever their recommendations or restrictions are. But I think it's a great event. We're looking forward to it. I have no concerns about us getting this done safely. And I just really appreciate Mo's help tonight in being able to provide a location for staging.
Chief, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it. Any questions, Mike? Comments?
I don't have any questions. Just to say that I was hopeful that you might have been able to return to a more traditional all-night graduation party this year, and it looks like we'll probably miss that by a month or two for that being possible. But I'm glad that this will happen again. This was great last year. And I'm glad everybody enjoyed it, and the kids can be excited about it this year. So I think this is great. And my only question about the route, and this might be for the chief, is just given the number of cars and the length, is there enough space to kind of get it through? That was my only thought, whether there's a concern about a backup with a shorter route.
You know, there's no question we're going to have a backup. We had one last year, and it's really just because the kids are obviously excited. They begin to see people they know out on the street. So we get that almost caterpillar effect where some cars go and then some cars slow. I will say that last year, as long as the route was and the participation, we didn't have a single complaint from the motoring public. I think people, you know, appreciate that this is important for the town, and I think they're willing to deal with the little bit of inconvenience, and we will obviously work on a route that tries to minimize that inconvenience as much as possible.
What time will it start?
1
I
o'clock.
believe it's
1 o'clock.
scheduled for 1 o'clock, so we'll probably stage close to 11:30.
Mm-hmm. So that should miss at least most of the traffic returning from McCarthy Park. I mean, soccer will be over by then, so there won't be as many. There probably won't be baseball or something going on in the afternoon, but there won't be as many cars trying to get from McCarthy elsewhere in town.
I don't think so, and the way the route goes, we're really going to have probably a short period of time on North Street anyway. If need be, we can always post an officer to divert, and we will do obviously a pretty good social media campaign to advise people to seek alternate routes during that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. This is great.
I don't really have any questions. I've got a couple thoughts. It really was a wonderful event. There was so much interaction between the crowds that I saw and the kids going by that it really was a very, I was going to say sweet event, but it really was very meaningful, and I think emotional. Maybe that's it. It was just a very heartfelt is maybe the right word. And so I think it's great if it does become a annual tradition. Sorry that the all-night graduation party isn't happening, or it's happening in a different form. It's like Park Street books moving to Main Street and the Medfield Bakery moving to Walpole. It's just gonna be a little different than its name this year. But so do we have a motion then?
Yes, I would move that we approve the request for the rolling rally on June 5th, 2021, subject to compliance with all applicable health regulations in place at that time, and under the guidance of the Board of Health.
I would second that.
Mr. Peterson
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes.
Thank you guys so much for running
Thank you
it.
both.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Good
Thanks.
luck.
Make
Thanks.
a lot of
Have a good
people
night,
very
everyone.
happy. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Yes.
Next, we've got Kimberly Brenton to request the use of the Medfield State Hospital for the Medfield High School football banquet. Hello, thanks for coming. Can't hear you. You're muted.
Better?
Yep, now we can hear you. Much better.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the plan is?
So I am the mother of a football captain, and we are tasked this year with trying to find a creative alternative to a football banquet for the end of our season. And we were thinking that maybe the state hospital would be a great venue for us. We were going with like a tailgating theme, kind of trying to keep it in the football family so that each family would be contained within their own vehicle. The Pollards have very generously offered to do a little barbecue for us, so families will be eating within their vehicle space. We just need space large enough to hold the vehicles, like probably 60 vehicles.
Okay. Mike, did you want to have questions and comments first?
I think this is a great idea. What date are you looking to do it?
Coach was hoping to have something maybe like the end of May, early June. So maybe like the 29th or June 12th, whatever works for you guys.
All right. Do we have anything? Neither of those dates rings a bell for me on the existing state hospital calendar.
No, but I mean, June 12th is my birthday, so if I come,
Yeah.
Sure.
really, Mike needs to put that on his calendar.
Well, clearly, I didn't know we were celebrating at the state hospital, Christine. Of course, I knew that was your birthday.
Kim is looking for the same area that we're using when we do the drive-in theater. We do Coolidge Corner, so using that field there.
Okay.
So, and
I think-
go ahead. I spoke to the Board of Health. I spoke to Bridget, and Bridget was fine with it as long as we go over COVID protocol, same as we just talked about with Kim and Janie as we get closer to the event.
Sure. No, and hopefully, end of May, early June, things will be loosened up a bit as well, so you can have a pretty good event. I think for an outdoor event by then, it should be reasonably normal tailgating activities, I would think. So at least high school tailgating activities. So I think this is a great idea.
I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense. Sounds good. So good luck with it.
So I would make a
good to meet
motion. Hello, Gus.
You know,
Mr.
I've been practicing 2 nights in a row with my mobile hotspot to make sure it worked. And it worked great for 2 nights. And then tonight it wouldn't do it until all of a sudden it did. And so I don't know what I did to fix it, but it turned on. So
Gus, where are you mobile hotspotting in from? You look like you're in a motel.
I am. In fact, the lighting is not as good as it looks like on the screen. For some reason, the camera adjusts. I'm in Jackson, New Hampshire. Had
Oh,
2
nice.
fantastic days of skiing. 5 degrees at Attach yesterday, but it was great. And about 25 degrees today, and it was better. So,
Oh, my favorite's Wildcat, but
yeah. Well, yesterday it wouldn't have been your favorite because it was really
it's
windy.
cold. Yeah.
Wind chill was like 10 below zero. So Wildcat wasn't the place to be.
Before they hit
Mr.
snowmaking.
Mr. Chairman, you probably want to formally announce
Yes.
Gus's attendance.
I mean, everybody who doesn't know I like to ski, Mark.
No, just to comply with the
Yes.
Open
state
meeting
laws, we have to announce that you're here now, Gus. So
Gus
Mr.
Murphy
Gustav
reporting in
Murphy
late,
has
sir.
miraculously appeared for us from Jackson, New Hampshire. So thanks,
And
Gus,
he's
for coming.
participating remotely, Pete. Note that he's participating remotely. He's
It's
not
like
in the.
remotely squared.
Yeah.
He's not in the room with any of us. So getting back to our motion.
Yeah, so I will make a motion that we approve the use of Medfield State Hospital for the Medfield football team banquet on May 29th or June 12th, subject to working out the date with the town administrator and with the Medfield State Hospital buildings and grounds, and in compliance with whatever health regulations are applicable at that time.
Second.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
and Mr. Marcucci, yes.
Good luck. Hope you have a great event.
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for coming.
Our next appointment is with the Medfield Board of Water and Sewage to discuss the Medfield Water Treatment Plant project. Hi, Mo.
Good
Thanks for
morning.
coming.
Good evening. Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Bill. Thank you for coming. Christian, thank you for coming. Randy, thank you. Is Bill going to be presenting or Mo?
Bill will be presenting.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got, I have about a dozen slides I'd like
Okay.
to share. Should I just get rolling with it?
Sure, please.
Okay, great.
Thanks for the materials you sent along as well.
Oh, our pleasure. Yeah, so I've got a dozen slides here. A lot of the material is probably in your FAQ. A couple of other nuggets that we've added in the last couple of days. And so this presentation is a collaboration with the Department of Public Works, the Water and Sewerage Board, as well as the consulting engineer of record for this project, Environmental Partners. This is intended just to be an overview, and we fully expect you're going to have some questions afterwards. So I'll probably defer and deflect some of the nitty and gritty questions of things that I can't answer. But we'd like to go over what our water resources are, why the filtration project is needed, what were some of the alternatives that we investigated along the way. I'll paint you a brief picture of our historical timeline on this project, a slide or two on the method of treatment, the scope of the project, and then the project funding in the financials that we've set up. So Medfield is blessed to have water resources, and the fact that they come from two different watersheds is also a blessing because it gives us some diversity. Currently, there is no treatment of the water itself, other than some minor pH adjustment to make sure it's not corrosive in the pipelines, which is a very typical approach, and also the addition of a low level of chlorine in the form of basically liquid chlorine in the form of like bleach, basically, which is used to reduce microbial growth as the water goes through the transmission system. And that's a typical method as well. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection regulates our wells. They regulate the permitting of them, the location, their design, how much we can pump from them, as well as how much they can pump instantaneously when you turn them on. They also regulate our wells through the imposition of specific drought restrictions as they're required regionally through the year. The DEP also looks at our system performance metrics, like how much water we use per capita. And then lastly, they also regulate the drinking water quality that's allowed. So just to give everyone just a little bit of some geographical bearings, we have 5 wells. We have well number 6 all the way up in the top left-hand of your screen. Well 1 and 2 are in the middle that are right off of near 109. And then well 3 and well 4 are as shown in the bottom right. Well 5 is an old well that is currently not permitted. So why is this filter project needed? Well, our water in one of the wells, specifically 3, has a higher level of manganese. And manganese, not magnesium, manganese is a naturally occurring metal. It's found in the geology all throughout New England, actually all throughout the world. And it's prominent around well number 3 and number 4. And so as rainwater percolates through the ground, it picks up the manganese and it gets along with other minerals in the strata, and that's how that gets into the aquifer itself. So why is this important? Massachusetts has an enforceable limit based on its concentration. We measure concentration in terms of milligrams per liter. And so the enforceable limit from the Mass DEP is 0.3. And our well number 3 has 0.3 to about 0.4 milligrams per liter. Now, when you sort of hit that tripwire, you need to reduce it below the Massachusetts secondary maximum contaminant level limit, which is 0.05. So basically, an order of magnitude lower is what it has to be in order to be compliant. And that's what we're designed for less than 0.05. It's also important to note that there is no federal maximum contaminant level for manganese, which means the EPA does not have a standard for this. There's about 7 or 8 states in the United States that have a similar enforceable limit to Massachusetts, New York, I think, California, and a couple other states. But it's not omnipresent within the United States to have an enforceable limit, excuse me, for manganese. But there are other reasons for it, that for removing manganese. Low levels of manganese can cause some mineral deposits on your faucets, and also can create like an off taste, sort of a metallic taste. But we also have some other rationale for this project. Wells number 3 and 4, they do need some rehabilitation. They currently cannot produce what they were originally designed for. In time, wells do need some maintenance, and they do need to be redeveloped. But we're also taking this opportunity to expand the instantaneous capacity of well number 3. In essence, although we can't pump much more instantaneously, we can pump basically the same as well 6 if we ever got into a pinch for whatever reason, say well 6 needed some more maintenance or something like that. So currently well number 6 has about 40%, I believe, of the production capability of all the wells. And this well number 3, if it's redeveloped, will have a similar instantaneous capacity once you hit the switch. It also turns out the investment in this infrastructure will be the lowest cost of water, the cost to produce water for the population. And then lastly, by making this investment in our water system, Medfield will retain its water independence. Now, we did look at some alternatives. The first thing we did was we asked ourselves, well, maybe there's another source of water somewhere else in Medfield that has suitable quantity and quality. Well, we went sort of on a hunt, looked all over Medfield, and we looked at 16 other locations in Medfield where the town owns such property. And there were no other locations that had really any sufficient quantity of water for us to use as a water resource. We also, the town entertained conversations with the MWRA as recently as late 2020. And just with the cursory conversations with them, it turns out that really is not a very cost-effective option. The upfront capital cost for a project to connect to the MWRA system would be approximately 2 times to 3 times the CapEx of the filter project that we're currently considering. And then we would have to buy the water on top of that. And so effectively, the operating cost would be twice that of what the current cost is for Medfield to produce its own water. And then also just pulling off a project like this, the execution really depends upon the cooperation of neighboring towns. There currently is not a close location for Medfield to tie into the MWRA with suitable infrastructure that will be able to basically keep up with the incremental demand that would be required for Medfield. And it's also important that this process will take 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it would mean that we wouldn't be compliant with from a DEP perspective in providing water with suitable quality while we're doing this investigation and lobbying and trying to get cooperation of towns and the like. So from a cost perspective, it's very expensive. From a project execution perspective, there's a lot of uncertainties. And in the end, there's no certainty that after all that it actually would bear fruit. So this is a general timeline. Just maybe stoke some of your memories. We started looking at the filter project or the manganese situation with wells 3 and 4 back in 2012. And frankly, I saw this when I first moved to Medfield, I saw this on a warrant. And first of all, I didn't know what a town warrant was. It came in the mailbox and I read it. And I saw that there was an investigation to do some pilot work to deal with a manganese problem. And me coming from the water industry, I wonder what this is. So I went down and I started talking. I found someone in City Hall and his name was Mike Sullivan. And after talking to him, he said, it sounds like you know a little bit about water. You ought to be part of this water board. Well, here I am. I opened my big mouth and I volunteered. So this project dates back then when we knew we needed to do something because we saw that the Massachusetts DEP was going to be putting up enforceable guidelines in the future. So since then, we've done actually 2 different treatment pilot studies. And back in 2015, the CapEx for this project began to appear on our master plan, which affected our water rates and our outlook for our CapEx and time. This is the fiscal year 2017-18, where we investigated the other water sources, and we decided that we have what we have, and redeveloping 3 and 4 was the route. And we did a preliminary filtration plant design, and from there we've moved to a final plant design, and I think we're at a 99.9% in the final design. The bids will be able to be let shortly. We've begun the application for a Massachusetts State Revolving Fund. I'll get into that in a second. We believe the construction will start in fiscal 2022, which is this summer, and take about 18 months or so. And so the plant could come online as soon as January of 2023. So what is the treatment method? It's what I call classic filtration. You'll see a picture here. It looks like a big, it's a big metal vessel, and you fill it up with a special type of sand. And this type of sand, it's been in use for over 50 years. And what it does is it takes a manganese, which is dissolved, which means you can't see it, and it catalyzes the oxidation. So it actually makes it viewable. You can see it. It becomes suspended matter. And then this sand actually filters it out. Now we do add a small amount of chemicals to it, and that's chlorine and sodium hydroxide, which are the same chemicals which we're actually using today in our transmission system. This would just be placed in front of the filters, so it's very compatible from a materials basis and for the staff to use. And we're not alone with this. This type of filtration has been installed in a number of different towns, from Webster, Plymouth, Shrewsbury, Kingston, Topsfield, Stoughton, Harwich, and there are about, I would say there are about 6 other towns that are in a variety of stages of planning such a treatment today. So this is a sort of an exploded map. To get your bearings, here is the railroad, here is the Wheelock School, and adjacent to that is a plot of land which is under the ownership or jurisdiction, I guess you would say, of the water department. And this is where well 3 and 4 are currently located. And this black box is the exploded view of the plant and where we would put the plant. Some of the other bits and pieces here, we would have some of what they call the backwash water to water. It's released from the filtration plant. Along this green line would go to a forced the forced main sewer main that will go to the wastewater treatment project. I'm sorry, the current wastewater treatment plant. So the scope of project, just the main bullets, the permit applications and approval. We're nearly at the finish line. The last one is the Medfield Town Board of Health. Once we execute the project there, the basics are, well, 3 will be replaced and redeveloped to a larger size. Well, number 4 will be refurbished. There'll be the building construction and then the placing of the filtration equipment inside, and then the commissioning, shaking it down and making it and bringing it up to performance standards. And there's also the connection of the water main as well as the pipeline for the filter backwash water. So how is this tracking against our financials, and what is the project cost? So I'll direct your attention over here to the right. The entire project right now is estimated to be about $12 million. The plant and infrastructure, basically, the equipment and the construction is around $9 million. Engineering services about 1.5, and we're currently we've currently allocated about $1.3 million in contingencies. So what we've done to pay for this is that if you look down in the bottom left, in fiscal 2020, we increased water rates by 5%, and then fiscal 21, which is the current fiscal year, we increased water rates by 12%. And then after that, we're projecting just about a 3 to 4% inflation rate for the next 5 years or so. That's our current visibility for big capital projects. The way we manage this is that we manage our free cash because our revenues are uncertain, but our costs are very certain. Our costs are about 95% of the cost to serve. What does that mean? It means our variable cost, which is mostly electricity, is only about 5% of our cost. So if we turned off all the water and no one wanted any water, we'd only save 5% of our costs. The rest of the costs to deliver water are the debt payment and salary and other fixed costs. So that's why we carry approximately about a $1 million in free cash balance. And these lines here are showing the free cash balance at the end of that fiscal year. So you can see we really kind of needed to come 18 and 19, and we have pulled ourselves back up above that $1 million line. And we're trying to keep that moderated at $1 million. The other lines you see here in blue, this is the total revenues that are expected as a result. Here we are in fiscal 2021. We feel pretty good about where this marker is right now, since we've already collected half of the revenue for the year, which is the larger part during the heavier water season. And the winter season, which is the bills in April, is, it's going to be about $750,000 to $800,000, and that's fairly predictable. So we feel pretty good about being at this point here, at this point here, and at this point here at fiscal 21. Now, how would we pay for it? This would be a 20-year bond. In our current models, we're assuming 3%. We believe that that's conservative based on current rates. We know that the rate environment is increasing, but we still think that 3% on a 20-year bond seems fair for our current models, especially if we hit the market in the next 6 months. The other funding opportunity is that we are looking to qualify for actually a state bond. It's actually something called the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. The short way to think about that, it's a line of credit from a federal level that's allocated down to the state level. And the state has a bucket of money where that they manage and they pick projects. And we are just below the line of being selected. And there's probably a 50% chance where the projects that have been selected might bow out or might move out. So we might move into that tier where instead of a 3%, then we would actually get a 2% interest rate. And that would be favorable to our model. That's the bulk of what I had prepared here. I've got backup materials in case you have really any questions. I'm sure you've got questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. That was interesting. That was a good presentation. Gus, do you want to start off?
Sure. I'm probably all over the map on this one, Bill, so you may need help or you may not have all the answers. I know the Neponset River Watershed Association weighed in against this and wanted us to go to MWRA. Can I assume that they are not going to be capable of introducing any significant obstruction to our being able to move ahead with this?
Well, actually, I can show you, I can put that letter up right now. I was actually anticipating that question. This is the letter that they sent, a nice letter, asking us to reconsider this. But it's nice that they noted that they understand that the concerns would generally be more appropriately addressed through the Water Management Act regulations and permitting reviews. So their primary legal recourse to change and influence the permits to those who've been granted permits is through that process. So this is a nice letter, but we believe that we are not only managing our infrastructure well, but to that point, if you look at how we've been pumping less and less water in time, we've been getting even better. So we've actually reduced the amount of water that we've been pumping on an annual basis by over 25% in the last 5 years. So we've staged like great leaps in conserving water and plugging leaks and having good conservation matters by having a very defined tier system. So in a way, with all due respect, these permits have been granted to Medfield, and they're valuable resources for the community. We think we've been doing, a good job in managing these resources, and you can see, in time, what those results have been. So, their recourse is to provide testimony, I guess, to the DEP, but our permits are in place. So we look to enjoy them and be the stewards of those resources in the future.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
If I could add, Gus, not only our water withdrawal permits are in place, but the permitting for this project is as Bill pointed out, nearly complete. So I think that the avenues here are fairly limited.
That was what was behind my question, was to make sure there wasn't any way they could politically throw a railroad tie in this process. And it sounds like, anybody can try to do anything they want, but the likelihood of them succeeding doesn't sound all that high. That's all I wanted to hear. This is a rookie question or an amateur question here. You talk about maintaining the wells or I think redesigning wells. I'm picturing a well as a pipe that goes down the ground, a pump attached to a pump, and either water comes out or it doesn't. What in general terms is involved when we actually go in and do maintenance on a well with a goal of being able to improve what we're pulling out of it?
Okay, I'm going to pull out the big guns and defer that question to Eric Kelly. I think.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure.
Well, Gus, essentially what you can do is you can do different methods of cleaning. So generally speaking, usually you do a video inspection to see if the stainless steel wedge wire screen is obscured at all with particulate matter that's developed over time. Right now, the town is redeveloping well 3 pretty much on an annual basis to keep its capacity as high as possible. But that well actually has a much smaller screen than the original well due to a collapse some number of years ago. So they're already working on reduced capacity. So you can surge it and develop it just mechanically, basically putting the equivalent of like a plunger up and down and surging water in and out of that screen to try and dislodge the materials. If it's more comprehensively obscured, then you can start using chemical cleaning, similar using like caustics or acids to try and free up some of those minerals. And generally speaking, once you get into that more advanced one, you're dealing with wells that are much more debilitated. So in the case of this project, we're going to be replacing well 3 in its entirety. Spot is about 30 feet away. We're in the same aquifer, but it will be a brand new screen, casing, well pump. Well 4 will be redeveloped as part of this project. So it'll include inspection and at least standard development with potential for chemical cleaning if needed.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Another question on the MWRA. Bill, you went through the significant increased costs of going to the MWRA. But as I was listening to you, I was wondering whether going to the I've always thought of it as kind of an all or nothing proposition. Either we're pulling water from the MWRA or we're producing our own water. Are we able to kind of reach a supplemental supply agreement with MWRA? In other words, we keep producing what we're producing, but if for some reason well 3 blew up and we didn't have any good alternative, can you just go to the MWRA and say, listen, we'll pay you a premium price to provide 20% of our town's water, or is it a commitment, blanket commitment?
So the way to think about it, or the way that I think about it, is that there is a lot of fixed costs in order to develop a project like that. And if that's what we had to do, then you get economy of scale. If you're going to spend $25 million for an 8-inch line, you're better off spending $30 million for a 12-inch line or something like that. It's important to note that if you buy water from MWRA, and there's also the infrastructure it takes to get it here, right? And the right of way, and you have to make sure that the other towns also have the pipeline. The pipe is big enough to serve you as well. I mean, it's not infinite. The town is not out of the water business. We have staff that maintains the lines, the hydrants. We have our own pressure, from our 2 tanks. We have a brand new tank at the hospital where we spent, I don't know, $5 or $6 million, and then about $500,000 recently on rehabilitating Mount Nebo. So we have fixed costs. Even if we just bought water, if somebody just brought water today with a big hose, we still have fixed costs, both from previous debt, but also staff. And we have billing requirements, because in the end, the town would have to most likely be the customer of record, right? And then from there, it would become a retail operation back into the rest of the town. So it's not like Comcast and we're getting individual bills that way for a project of this sort of build out. Because if we were going to go with loans that they provide and other things, it's not as clean as saying I want to switch from Verizon to Comcast.
Okay, thanks. And one last question, and this I'm pretty sure is an off the wall question, but it's something I've wondered about. When we bought the state hospital, we also acquired the tubular well field that's down off of Harding Street. I've read a letter at the time that the state owned the state hospital that this would probably, Bill Macero's on, he'll have this down pat, but it might have been a letter in the late 90s or early 2000s that identified a significant supply of water capacity coming out of the tubular well field. And then after we bought the tubular well field, suddenly it was a water field that had no capacity. So a 2-part question. The fundamental question is, do you know what happened to the tubular well field? And then tied to that, when you looked at all those alternatives sources, did that happen to be one of the ones that you looked at?
So I'll try to take my best swing at that. We heard that same information as part of the investigation to find other water resources. We did try to do pilot wells in that area, and they had no yield. However, the town was the beneficiary of, I'm going to depend on Eric to give me the right wording for this, but the permits were transferred to that, and they became part of our total permitted annual withdrawal rate from the Charles River Basin, and then ultimately the combination of the Neponset and the Charles River Basin. How'd I do, Eric?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, they basically transferred, it did not transfer under a registration. It transferred under the Water Management Act permit. So it contributed to your total of 1.5 million gallons a day.
Yeah, so we got, so as part of the transaction, that that permit, which was under the guise, I guess, of the state, became sort of, for lack of a better term, titled to the town of Medfield, and it became additive to what the DEP sees as our registered permitted values. But is the water in the ground there for that? No, unfortunately.
Then I have one more off the wall question, which you may or may not be able to answer. What is the legal status? So the tubular well field is land the town owns. It was presumably at the time we acquired it a well field, which presumably we would use as a well field. If in fact that well field is useless for that purpose, does anyone know what the legal status of that land is in terms of how the town can or can't use it, given that it is actually not a well field?
I think I'd have to defer that to Council Sorrell or someone who knows more about it, because that was not part of the parcel. Because remember, the Medfield Water and Sewer got a parcel of land in order to put the new tank on, and that tubular well field was not part of that. That what was signed by the governor. So I think that is part and parcel, literally, of the rest of the land that is part of the hospital development. So I don't know if you're asking, can you do something other than that's a question for, I think, a different board or committee.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, it was your answers led me to that question. That question doesn't concern the Water and Sewer Board. It's a bigger question of, I'm wondering now whether we have a piece of land we didn't actually, that is available for town purposes that we never recognized as being available.
Or your other hidden question might be, if you thought it was a tubular well field, did it prevent you from considering it for a different development than, is it a no-fly zone, or is it now qualified? So that's a great question for another board.
Bill Massaro just confirmed that the LDA for that tubular well field says that if we don't use it, we have to revert back to the state. So for the time being, that will remain as a tubular well field.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Mike, any questions, comments?
So Gus hit a number of my questions, and so I mean, it seems like the recommendation is a strong one from the Water and Sewer Board that this is the way to go, and it certainly looks like you have explored the MWRA option as far as it can go. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes. We just didn't see an angle or really a light to present something that was reasonably accelerated to serve the population, that had a reasonable cost or a reasonable use of capital. There really wasn't any dimension that seemed to make sense. But however, I would like to acknowledge that it's fantastic to have that resource, within sort of reaching distance if we really had to. Not a lot of places do have something like that. So I think it's fabulous that it could be a possibility if we ever had to. You can imagine if it wasn't there, that we would have like a different sort of point of view. And I think having, multiple resources in Massachusetts gives us a lot of options.
And that is helpful. And I will say from my perspective, I think the MWRA option was going to have to be clearly better for me to prefer it, because I think there are advantages, and you noted it on your slides, to maintaining our independence and not having even more water systems in the state tied into this one source of water. I think there is, even if there was some added cost to it, and it looks like there's not, there's a value to the town to having your own water system. I think it's that is an advantage that we have, and I think we should be extremely reluctant to give that up. Does this filtration system, does it have any adaptability to filter for other stuff other than manganese? I mean, given that regulations change and standards change and concerns change over time, I mean, if we're required to remove other stuff from the water besides just the manganese and the iron, I mean, do we have a leg up, or will we be looking to build a filtration system for a different one for something else,
No,
5 years from now?
It's a good question. Now, this type of sand is somewhat specialized. It does remove manganese. It does remove iron very well as well. As a matter of fact, it's the same media that's used for that. We might operate it slightly differently. Basically, how much water we push through it depends on how much mass is in the water, what they call the load rate, and also how often and how much water we might backwash. So if we were pumping these wells and iron came out higher than what was desirable, the same plant would hit that purpose. There obviously would be some thresholds where it would sort of be too much for that, but I think well within would be acceptable variation, up to 1 part per million or so of iron, maybe even more, and then the fraction of manganese, that would be fine. There are a number of things that come out of well waters that sometimes would need treatment. This isn't a catch-all for that. One thing that was required as part of this design was to anticipate that. The DEP really kind of promulgated or put into play that they wanted to make sure that if there was an emerging contaminant, something new that came up, there was an easy way to retrofit that. And the building and the design is actually designed for that. Not to sound like a home improvement show, but this would be sort of a bump out to the existing building. And there are flanges that are ready so that all we have to do is disconnect the flanges, which is just the flat part of a pipe, and then plumb it appropriately to added filtration. So this type of media does do more than just manganese. It does do iron, and it does do some other trace metals, but I don't see them around here. If it turns out that if we have another contaminant that we have to deal with, the physical building itself is made, it's designed so that if we do have to address that, we would address it there. But also, let's remember that this project is for well 3 and 4. And if there was something that had to be done at different well sites, then that would be sort of a different conversation, I think.
But this does potentially have some advantages down the road if there's other things we have to deal with that we don't know of right now. I mean, we wouldn't be starting from scratch if we had to add another tank or add a different treatment method.
So practically speaking, it's very often that if you have manganese in well water, you do tend to find a little bit of iron, and vice versa. It just turns out what's in this particular project, manganese is the driver, and what little trace levels iron there are, that'll be scooped up with this filter project. If it turns out that, and sometimes geologies can be a little bit dynamic, that does happen where the amount of manganese or other minerals go up and down a little bit based on their recharge rate, because recharging aquifers do take some time. But for what we're doing, we're removing manganese, and it would not be uncommon for a little bit of iron to show up. And this treatment plant is suitable to that to some reasonable limits.
I think that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So I did have a couple of questions too. On your MWRA analysis, I'm assuming that most of the cost of joining is the connection down to Norwood or wherever else we could hook in. Is that correct?
There is, let me see if I can remember. I might rely on Nick because I don't have.
So like 4.4 million to the MWRA.
Yeah, there's a one-time connection fee that based on the amount of water that you're going to buy, and then there's that's to like join the club, really, essentially. And then there is the interconnection for us. And obviously, if there were improvements from our neighbors that were required, they would probably put that burden of their town's improvements back on us in order to accommodate the incremental flows to get to Medfield.
Well, I guess, I thought that the materials about the MWRA were pretty persuasive in terms of the costs. But I guess what I would suggest is that as a town, that we keep our eye on Walpole, and that if they join the MWRA, that we try to talk to them about putting in piping that's big enough to allow Medfield to connect and use the MWRA if in fact they're going to connect to Walpole to the Norwood connection, because that would save us a lot from building the connection through Walpole to Norwood.
Yeah, if that does have merit, at some point in the future. But let's also remember that just buying the water is the big income, is the other incremental cost. Even if they just showed up with the hose, what you pay for the water is going to basically double the water bill.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Then add the CapEx of the $20 to $30 million on top of that, which is, even with low interest loans, you're talking about $2 million. So of debt, and for 20 years. So, you look at my other slides before, that's like tripling the debt load. And debt is debt. That doesn't go away.
So my second questions have to do with the treatment facility for wells 1 and 2, which is along 109. We built a treatment tower to treat volatile organic compounds that no one could ever figure out where they were coming from.
Sure.
I understand that the volatile organic compounds have now disappeared, and so we don't need that treatment facility any longer. Is that the correct status of where things are now?
Those units were made, yes, they were made to strip out volatile organics. Essentially, you put water down through a tower. It has like wiffle balls in the middle.
Yeah.
You're forcing fan air up through it, and so these particles are volatile, and they strip out that way.
Yeah,
and it
they
hasn't
become a
been,
gas.
Yeah, they haven't been measurable enough. I don't even remember the last time that we've had to activate them. Since I've been on the board, I don't think we've actually activated the treatment part of well 1 and 2.
Okay. I remember that we paid around 600,000 for that unit. I just keep wondering if there's a market for used treatment facilities on eBay somewhere, but.
Well, maybe for the wiffle balls that are inside, but
yeah,
I think that's kind of, that all truth be told, it's, sheet metal, but it's designed for a specific purpose. And, there really isn't a market for something where the customer wants a specific performance endpoint.
So the third thing I wanted to ask you about was the capacity that we have. I heard Eric say that we're permitted for 1.5 million gallons. Is it per day?
That's an annual average per day. That's right.
Okay.
Instantaneously, we actually produce much more than that, but within limits.
So when everybody's watering their lawns in the summer, we go above the 1.5. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're over 2 million instantaneously, probably.
Okay. All right.
Points, sure. Yeah.
So what I'm getting around to is I don't know why, but years ago I went to a program in the Charles River Watershed Association. I think talked about it in terms of gallons per day per person, and they were trying to get us down to around, I think it was like 60. And so I just did a quick division of your 1.5, or I guess the chart showed that we were doing about 1 million, because you had a chart that showed us that we've actually been using less water.
There's a couple of different things. One is that's what's pumped, but not all that water is part of the Mass DEP per capita consumption. You have to back out water that's used for flushing. You have to back out water that's used for other circumstances, and then you get down to what's available for that. It's called I think our per capita is down to 65 or 67 right now.
Wow, that's great.
So yeah, no, So, even as part of all of this, our numbers, there are a half a dozen numbers that the DEP looks at like year after year. And one of them is your unaccounted for water, which is your water losses. The other is the per capita consumption. They know that it's, I believe they know that it's kind of difficult to manage the consumption of how much your customers, use on an annual basis. There's a lot of seasonality to that.
Right.
And also year to year. But however, the unaccounted for water losses, which are the leaks, so to speak, is something that they do put a lot of pressure on, and we have responded. And that's one of the reasons why, our town is around the same size that it was, 5 years ago, plus or minus 500 people, but we're actually pumping 20 to 25% less water than we used to because of the leaks that we have plugged throughout the infrastructure.
So that's what I was curious about. So that your efforts to find those leaks have been successful then. So congratulations. Good.
Yeah, it's actually been several years of it. It's a case where I think Mo and his team should be incredibly proud of all the work. I mean, just look at the slope where we were right up against it in 2015. And after all this hard work, you can see it's around, 1.1 to 1 million gallon per day. So they've made incredible strides.
So that sort of leads into the next question that I had for you, which has to do, well, I guess I had one more on the leaks, because at one point we were very high in terms of our percentage on the leaks, but our percentage on the leaks is a more normal number now, because we were up at like 20 or 25%, weren't we?
No, our unaccounted for water losses were very high, and now they are tracking close to the state average. The DEP target is closer to like 13%. I think the state average is around 15, and I think ours is around 16 to 17.
So we're in good shape on that build, are we now then?
I feel pretty good. We're about to, in the next couple of weeks, fill out the last calendar year of information. So we'll see. We feel pretty good about it.
Okay, so that leads into the other area that I wanted to ask about, which is the capacity of the town's water to support the Medfield State Hospital development, if and when it happens. Are we able to support the development that's going to happen there? Supposed to happen there?
We'll see what the development is.
Yeah, I think that the short answer to that question is we've got a limit to what we can withdraw, 1.5 million a day on average. We've got pumping capacity to support that volume. So any development that happens at the state hospital has to be done in a way that we're not, pushing heavy water uses that end up putting us in a situation where we have the potential to exceed that. So we've got the capacity to do what the system is permitted to do. But I think any development at the state hospital has to manage that sort of maximum. And what we've seen to date, I think we've generally felt like we had capacity, but a lot of the numbers that we've seen to date have been fairly preliminary. So it's
well, that's, yes, but that is, as long as you feel confident, Christian, that we've got the capacity to deal with the things like the reuse committee came up with, then that would be what we need to know, I think.
Well, I think it's important to point out that what seems to be more likely the case that will be developed up there will be probably, first of all, a little bit more dense than a home on a half acre of land where they're watering it all of the time. The second is that a more modern approach to the plantings and water conservation from the beginning, from the get-go. I think that would go a long way to reducing the need for water on a per acreage basis.
You know, Pete, another way of maybe thinking about this too is, Bill, I think I take your reply that, well, we need to know what's actually going to happen at the state hospital before I can give you an intelligent answer to the question. But more generally, if the numbers that you showed us, which is a 1.5 million permit limit and about a 1.1 million current pumping usage, I'm just looking at that and saying, so you'd have to have something happen at the state hospital that would be 30 to 40% of current townwide usage to hit that permit limit. Now, for planning purposes, I would just say cut that in half and say you'd have to be envisioning something happening at the state hospital that would increase townwide usage by 15 to 20% to kind of, get at something that would give us pause. And I can't imagine, if you added 15 to 20% of our population, I don't think that's going to happen up there. Unless there's some sort of I can't think of the industrial operation that would use a lot of water either. So
yeah. And one last point is, for the incremental amount of population that would go up, that would be placed on that hospital, it actually would be favorable to some of our water use metrics. If you have more, first of all, a more modern building, more modern approach to watering, and then also slightly more dense population, the amount of water used per capita in the town will actually go down. The absolute number might go up slightly, but since you're adding to the denominator of the equation, then your per capita use would go down. If that gives you solace.
Yeah, it does actually, but we still need to be under the 1.5 apparently. So.
Yeah, well, if we were trying to develop the project, the hospital project back in 2015, I think the water situation would be high on the list of things to figure out, and it would have been a rate limiting factor in the development of that project. But now,
yep. Thanks for fixing all those
showing
leaks.
is that by putting the right investment in maintaining the lines and the department's efforts, they're bringing the water use basically plugging the leaks and taking care of our valuable resource.
So how do you find the leaks? Do you run cameras through, or is there some quick and easy way to find leaks?
Mo, you want to take that?
Sure. We have a company that comes in twice a year now. We used to be once. We increased it twice a year. They go around with specialized equipment, listening for leaks in all different areas of the pipes, of the infrastructure, our hydrants, any kind of water connections to the houses, wherever they can find. They've been pretty successful in finding larger area leaks that we were able to repair in a small amount of time. So I think, 5 or 6 years ago, I think we're up around 31% down to about 16, 17%, like Bill said. And we also looking at water meters in our system that are slowing down, or large meters that we're replacing, master meters that are showing that we're losing water through the meters. So as we do our replacements, we're cutting down on the unaccounted for water as well. It's actually better if it's in leaks, because it's something that's not being used. If it's in our meters, that means we're using the water, and our per capita would be affected by that. But all in all, we're the guys have been doing a great job of attacking the leaks and changing out meters. So.
Mo, I remember at one point we were having trouble getting some meters replaced. Are we pretty much finished with our meter replacement or not?
There's still a list of certain meters that are very difficult to get to. It's come down a lot. It's not as that many anymore, but they're in different locations, behind walls, under barriers that we have a difficult time to get to. So those still have to be addressed, but it's a very small amount now.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A. There's a question. If there is manganese and iron, is there also aluminum that will be filtered out? Aluminum also often goes along in acidic groundwater. Is there an aluminum limit for drinking water?
We do not currently have aluminum in our water. Well, let me see. No, it's a very, very low trace amount. I don't believe it. Well, I don't know if it's in the specific well that we're treating. Aluminum can be oxidized fairly readily as well. Eric, you want to bail me out of this question?
There is a secondary standard similar to iron and manganese, so it's an aesthetic concern. You can have discolored water if you have high levels of aluminum, but I was trying to look up the most recent lab data we had just to see.
Yeah,
I only recall trace levels, not secondary standard levels.
Yeah, I saw levels that were, let me see, the secondary limit is 200 parts per billion or 0.2 ppm. And what was detected was approximately 1/10 the limit. So it's very, very low.
Sorry, that question came from Hilly Passes, sorry. The next question is from Christine McHugh Potts. Any chance of developing a comprehensive wellhead protection plan for the town? It would seem, given the expense and significance of the proposed water treatment plan, it would be a smart step to take. Wayland has a great example, and it's something the state recommends.
How should we field that? We have enough squares here. Eric, our approach to the permits and the summary that we worked on before and the use of a comprehensive wellhead protection program was basically the foundation of that question. It's our path in how we are permitting our resources, consistent with a program as such.
So you have, through the Aquifer Protection District, you do have the local controls over things within both the Zone 1 and the Zone 2 for your sources. A wellhead protection plan could be the type of thing that a Mass DEP could come to the town and look and request as part of a future Water Management Act related project, or it could be an update to the source water protection plans that were developed in the early 2000s by Mass DEP. It could become a requirement that they might impose on many water systems, not just Medfield. I think one thing to point out is like the town's wells, a lot of them predated a lot of these regulations, case of well 3 and 1 and 2. So they have non-conforming Zone 1 protection radiuses right now due to pre-existing infrastructure, the railroad or Route 109. So it is something that could be addressed. It probably would just be a build upon what the town already has for local controls at the Zone 1 and Zone 2 levels.
Sounds like maybe that's something that would be prudent for us to take up at a board meeting and discuss the pros and cons and what it would take to put something like that in place. It's really not something that as a board we've discussed.
And the last question is actually a comment from Bill Massaro. PAIR estimate for preferred scenario in 2018 was 104,000 to 124,000 gallons per day residential use.
That was the permit?
No, that was their Title V. They used Title V numbers to come up with the build out for that hospital development scenario. So it was basically a residential per capita by the number of bedrooms.
The PAIR study. Yes. So that's just over 100,000 gallons per day in domestic water demand for what was proposed in one of the scenarios early on with the hospital. So that's 0.1 million gallons. We're at 1 to 1.1. So the average of another 0.1 is just another 10% or so if we're using that sort of figure. So to address Pete's question earlier, incrementally, it's another 9%, and we have that 9%, or no, Gus, that extra 9% in incremental demand as per the PAR study is there.
So then the other thing that occurs to me is, do we have the capacity at the sewage treatment, the wastewater treatment plant as well, for that type of additional 100,000, 125,000 gallons per day?
I believe we do have that capacity along with the water. The issue we have right now, we have some inflow and infiltration issues that we're working on with Woodard and Curran, actually, who's here tonight. And they've been doing a great job of trying to pinpoint our locations of groundwater that's infiltrating into our system. So that's what we're working on right now. So hopefully we'll be able to reduce that as well.
How do you find those, Mo? Is that listening the way you do for leaks, or do you run a camera to find those?
No, actually, Scott, you want to chime in on that one? Scott Salvucci from Woodard and Curran.
Yeah, Scott Salvucci, Woodard and Curran. So we've been helping DPW. We've been looking at the sources of II, infiltration and inflow, into the pipes of the sewer system, which end up being collected and brought down to the wastewater treatment plant. So the way we've been going about that, we've looked at some installing flow meters in certain locations, strategic manhole locations within the sewer system of the town, to really segment the sewer systems and start to pinpoint which areas might be producing the most extraneous flows. And then as we've been able to study that, we've started to pinpoint areas to really start to do some field investigations, which is by smoke testing. So we've smoke tested a couple of different areas in town. That was done in the fall. And as the spring comes up just around the corner, probably in a matter of weeks, really, we'll go out at night and we'll do some flow monitoring in sewer manholes and CCTV following that, depending on what's found during the night flows. Really, you want to be able to measure during the night so you can kind of see what's happening without the use of normal residential uses or businesses. So you can really see what's coming in from the groundwater. So you do it during the nighttime.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Interesting. Okay. Thanks for the lesson.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Anything else for the team? Thank you guys very much for coming then.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So the select board is moving into a discussion area where we've got COVID-19 status, fiscal year 2022 operating and capital budgets, and the 2021 annual town meeting and warrant articles.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call your attention that you've again downloaded the agenda too soon, and we have an additional item to talk to Hildren Passas with Medfield Energy Committee letter.
Thank you so much.
Makes you feel better, Pete. I printed the agenda out before I headed up north, so I was equally clueless. You were not alone on this one.
I've done this enough times now that I just go to the website and I pop up what's live on there.
That's how I got onto the Zoom call, was going to the website and pulling down the PDF. Actually,
me too. I didn't read what was underneath it.
I think you're all ignoring the emails we're sending you.
Oh, I didn't see them, so I did ignore them. Hi, Hilly. Thanks for coming. Tell us about, and Fred, thank you too. Tell us about the letter that you're asking that the town signed on to.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. And first of all, wow, I learned so much in the last hour. That was like a webinar. It's awesome. And
I didn't even bring up the fact that someone from the Energy Committee area had brought up in the past week net zero water usage as part of sustainability issues.
Well, I think that's going to come more and more to the fore, and the technology is there, and we just have to bring it up once in a while, I think. So I'm here. This should be quick because, consistent with what the Energy Committee has been doing, I'm not here to ask for funding, but I'm asking for the select board for action for the town to receive funding and support from the state. As you all know, the Global Warming Solution Act from 2008 has created a framework for reducing greenhouse emissions that give all of us a reasonable chance to avoid the worst effect of global warming. It required a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions starting from a baseline of 1990 to last year. And it was amended recently to have a goal of net zero by 2050, which means at least an 85% reduction from the 1990 level. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs has created and released a roadmap to 2050, I'm sorry, that outlines how the state overall is going to get to that net zero goal by 2050. And it also has released an interim plan, which is called the Clean Energy and Climate Plan 2030, that gives a pathway for reaching that goal in a short term, in a sort of at that time frame to 2030. The goal is to reach the climate goals that the state has set in a cost-effective and equitable way. The plan really calls for all levels of government to become active in taking action to reaching that goal. And especially the local governments will have to take action going forward, because the 2050 goal, the 25%, the 2020 goal, the 25% reduction in greenhouse gases have been reached, but they have been reached mostly through action that the state was able to take on in greening electricity. So our power plants have just gotten so much cleaner. Going forward, the major onus is going to be on personal choices and local actions to increase electrification in all areas of our lives, so that all that green energy that the state is looking to produce will actually be used in favor of combustion engines and using fossil fuels. So there's going to be a major onus on local communities to take action. The Clean Energy and Climate Plan for 2030 is an interim plan, and there's a public comment period ending on the 22nd of this month. And we have gotten together with a number of other communities in Massachusetts to write a letter to ask for legislative, regulatory, technical, financial support in training, engineering, personnel, coordination between the state and the municipalities, web-based tools, procurement tools, implementation services, and better data to support local action. And I can, if you would like, I would read you the other towns that are participating in writing to the Secretary of the EA to give the towns better support. They include Ashland, Arlington, Chelmsford, Concord, Framingham, Holliston, Lexington, Melrose, Natick, Newton, Northborough, Sherburne, Sudbury, Swampscott, Wellesley, Westborough, and Weston. And I believe I have forwarded the way for the selectmen to sign this, to support this. And I would like to ask the select board to support that multi-town letter to the EA, to the secretary, so that the town can receive the support to implement what the state is asking us to do. So are there any questions?
Gus, do you want to start?
Yeah, just and I may just not be paying attention to the legislature in the last couple of months. As I think we all know, there was legislation that was passed by the legislature, sent to the governor, vetoed by the governor, and I was following along far enough to know that the legislature was rejiggering the legislation for resubmission. Has that become law signed by the governor yet?
My understanding is that it was sent back by the Senate. I think it's now called the S12 bill. And there have been minor changes, but the big changes that the governor requested have not happened. So the Senate is sticking by their guns and basically saying this was a good bill.
So what we really have is we're in the middle of a political fight over what to do about the climate.
Right.
And this is a request for us to sign on to support the legislature against the governor?
No, this is not, it's not a legislative, it's not a call for action. This is really for calling the state. They have already asked us to implement the 2008 bill and to reach the net zero goal by 2050. What we're saying is we really need the funding, we need the training, we need the cooperation between the state and the towns. We need a simplification of the regulatory framework and clarification of the regulatory framework to reach that. We're not calling on the legislature to go ahead. That I think is for private citizens to do.
Okay, so the funding piece of what you said, I understand why towns would ask send us funding. I understand why, and incidentally, I'm not prepared to decide tonight because I haven't seen the letter. I actually, Christine did realize there was a letter there. It's just that because I've been gone, that's one thing I didn't get to while I was gone. But what specific, the funding and the training I get, I'm curious about what kind of regulatory relief we would be asking for. And I'm also curious about what would some examples of local action be that we would be implicitly suggesting we would undertake.
All right, so the regulatory framework relates to the building code and also to the way green communities would be transitioning to adopting the stretch code. It seems, and maybe Fred can back me up a little bit, but it seems there's not really a clear process, and we're asking the really doer to help us clarify how that process will work.
So
Right,
Fred,
so
Fred,
if I
I
can
don't
jump-
understand the problems, so please, yeah, help
If I
me
can
out there.
jump in here. So just to, as what Hilly is saying is that the joint letter from all these communities is in response to the governor, to the administration's plan that was put out in December. And the governor, his office asked for input. This is a response, this is input that was asked for. And by the way, Hilly didn't say, but I found it, all our colleagues collaborating on this, I found it remarkable that in each of the 7 items that are mentioned here, they say this is what the plan explicitly calls for. And in each of those 7 cases, they're just saying, please either, clarify or supply, can you help us with funds or training, et cetera. It's not making anything new that I can see at all, unless Hilly, you think differently.
I did no, it's not questioning the plan that the governor has put out.
Right.
It's basically saying, this is what you're asking us to do. We need the tools to do it.
Okay, that's it. And again, I'd like to read it. If that in fact is the case, then it doesn't sound like to me that it's necessarily an objectionable letter at all. So I'm not arguing against the letter because I haven't read the letter. I'll make an editorial comment, Fred, and this will mean something to you. And Hilly, you brought up the green communities. I'm not sure if both of you are aware of the history. When we were first discussing whether or not to adopt the energy stretch code, it failed the first time it came up before the warrant committee. And at the time, I think there were some technical concerns about what the stretch code might mean for someone who wants to do a renovation on a house that wasn't built to higher standards to begin with. So there were some technical concerns, but this first time and the second time it came up, part of our discussion was, well, when every town in the state adopts the stretch code, the stretch code becomes the code and there's no brakes on the progress. Now, Fred, you actually sent us some information probably a year ago. I think it was the early stage information around net zero. And one of the things that I snagged up on, not with regard to net zero, but with regard to what was in the material you sent, was a comment from the sponsor, the organization that did it, which is the state, it's the lobbying group that's pushing for, better environmental action at the state level. They commented on how the stretch code wasn't making fast enough progress, so we needed to go and do something else. So I don't know whether my concern here is valid with regard to this letter, but I have learned to be very watchful for the political agenda behind seemingly innocent requests. And so my skepticism here is not grounded in what I know. At this point, it's simply being put out there because of what I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to go through that. But I'll raise that as a concern that something that sometimes sounds innocuous is being pushed because we have lobbying groups that have agendas and it's in their interest to do that. So my point here is I want to be sure I understand the political dynamics behind this letter, not merely the letter, before I would know which way I come out on it. From what you just said here, it doesn't sound objectionable to me, but I'm merely being cautious because I haven't read the letter yet.
Thanks, Gus. Mike, anything from you?
Yes, I had two comments on the letter itself, and one is in paragraph 3, or I'm sorry, section 3, in the third paragraph of section 3. The first couple of sentences there need to be changed. I just don't think we got to be characterizing the lawmaking mechanisms of our town as a local legislative burden or as some sort of insurmountable obstacle to progress that the state needs to relieve us from our own system of government. So we have successfully in the past, I do recall well the lack of success the stretch code had the first time, and then it ultimately succeeded and we became a green community, and we've been successful in adopting these things through our town meetings. So I don't think we got to carry, I don't think any town, chief executive of any town should characterize the local form of government as a burden that the higher level bureaucracy ought to relieve us of. So I like that language changed. And then the other question I had is in section 4, in the second paragraph, in the reference to the schools that were built, the net zero ready schools that were built in a number of towns. I'm just not familiar with each of those schools. And so I'm familiar with the Lexington reference, and there's sort of an adjective in there to say that these building types don't present a significant financial burden to taxpayers. I do think, actually, based on what we know from our own school project, that the net zero ready won't present a significant burden to taxpayers. It's the next step if we went with a geothermal system. But I guess if we're going to sign on to the reference to significant, I'd just like to know what the actual burden there was. And again, I don't think it's not a deal breaker one way or the other for me. If something's worth doing, sometimes it's worth paying for, but we just ought to be straightforward about what it is we're paying for and what the cost is. So that was my only other comment. Otherwise, I didn't, obviously I would say things differently, but those are the only two things that I had any issue with. So I look forward to hearing from Gus once he's read the letter as well.
So on your second comment, actually, I don't have the numbers for each of these schools, but you may notice in that PDF that went out that the net zero ready was highlighted, and that was a late addition to the last draft, exactly for that reason, because it was the communities wanted to make clear that this is really what they're referring to.
Yeah, and I think that reference to net zero ready, I just be curious as to if some of those towns did go with a geothermal system, it would be a more substantial cost in the same way it would be for us. Whether that's a significant cost or not depends on what you mean by significant.
I think
We
that's
could-
for the school development committee. to
Yeah, well,
look
and
at.
for the taxpayers to debate what is significant and what isn't. That was the other thing that jumped out at me. No other comments on the letter.
Hey,
Okay,
hey, Mike,
thanks.
can I just throw a comment in? I'm not sure if Fred's going to be happy about this one or not, but to the point about net zero ready versus net zero for schools, my expectation right now is that Fred is going to lead us to a direction where it's net zero for the new school at no net cost to the town. Now, recognizing that a piece of that, based on the Lexington example that he brought before us, involved the financing of the groundwater, or of the heat pump, using the cash flow from the incentives of the heat pump to pay off the debt. So it's not exactly no net added cost to the school, but from the standpoint of the financial impact on the town, it's no impact on the town. Now, Fred, you may just get to a point where that can't be done. But right now I'm saying, well, if Lexington can do it, I don't understand why Medfield couldn't do it. And on top of that, we have the benefit of 2 or 3 more years of technology development on top of what Lexington said they needed in order to make it work. So I don't know if that comment is a good comment for you, Fred, or a bad comment, but I don't want to reinforce the notion that we've thrown the towel in on net zero already, on net zero versus net zero ready.
Well, I appreciate that, Gus, and it sounds like where I thought you were last time I heard you comment on this, and that's terrific. And it's funny that we're discussing this aspect because I believe you'll have more information on this in whatever it is, a week or so. This meeting, the Dale Street numbers that pertain particularly to Dale Street. And in that this particular list here that are mentioned, of course, yes, we do know a lot about Lexington. We've also talked a lot with Acton Boxborough. And I'm looking at the other towns. Wellesley we know of, and Westboro, yes. So Megan Sullivan has been working on that, as has Alex Stevens with the Arrow Street people. And I think there'll be a lot more to report next week. But I think, Gus, you and I are actually thinking the same way. I think we're both hoping for the same results.
Right. Thanks, Fred.
So I guess, Hilly, I'd ask you, given the timing for the submission of these comments, if the select board isn't going to act tonight, which it sounds like it won't, then we're going to miss the deadline, aren't we?
Yes, we will. I think then the Energy Committee is going to move it forward to submit that more or less privately, if the town is not willing to affix an official seal to it.
What, I don't know what that means, Hilly.
Well, so
Not sure
this,
that's right.
this, as I said, this letter is going to be submitted during the public response period to the CECP 2030 by, those towns, whatever, 17, 18 towns that I just read out. The deadline for submission is the 22nd, and I think the multi-letter town, the submission, the signature deadline is the 19th. So if the select board cannot make a decision on it tonight, we're not going to be part of that multi-town letter, and we will ask, the Energy Committee members to submit it privately.
As private citizens.
Yeah.
My concern was that the Energy Committee, I assume, will not speak on behalf of the town without getting the approval of the selectmen. Are we clear on that, right?
Yeah, we've already, so the Energy Committee had this on the agenda last week, and that's why we're advancing it right now, because we would love the town to be part of this group of towns that are.
Yes, I guess the lesson there is to give the selectmen more lead time to react to things like this. I mean, who's imposed the deadline?
So the organizers for this, well, the 22nd is a state deadline. That's the end of the response period. And the towns have really had, spent a lot of this time getting that input from all the towns to get this letter formulated.
You can imagine the 16 towns collaborating.
So 16 towns wrote the letter that they wanted, and they said, "Hey, let's put it out there for other towns, see if anybody wants to join the crowd."
Well, it's been an iterative process.
So I guess what I'm wondering about is, because we're not deciding tonight, we're missing a deadline, and I'm saying that's a pretty short lead time for this town to make that decision. And I'm trying to understand whether that's just because some other towns got together and did something on their own and then just said, let's put it out there, or why this is
No,
showing
the
up with
final
such a short-
version what hasn't, I mean, that because it was a, repeated process, the final version, the way the last energy committee meeting fell, that's when the final version we were able to discuss. And
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
just
All right. Well,
happened a week ago, so when did we meet? Last Wednesday, I think.
Last Thursday.
Last
Thursday,
Thursday.
yeah.
So I sent it out right away, and I guess it just
okay.
took a while to get.
So what I would, if there's any merit to this, what I would suggest, again, because I don't know whether I'm for or against the letter, I would suggest, if you think it makes sense, that we selectmen still look at the letter and decide whether we would endorse it or otherwise support it. And if we send a letter from Medfield in late that says, gee, the selectmen did not fully review and consider this, so we're sending it in, they can throw it in the wastebasket if they want to, unless
Well, I
you think
guess-
that's a waste of time.
I mean, we could kind of set it up so that we would come to a final conclusion in the next day or two or three. And then if we were all willing to do it, it could get sent. But Mike, you sounded like you wanted to change some wording. So that I don't think works with a group letter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third paragraph that requests, bypassing the local legislative process to implement new building code should be deleted. I mean, frankly, I don't think any town should be suggesting that they bypass their own legislative process for this. So, I mean,
yeah, and I'd agree with that on its merits. If the question is, we got to know one way or the other, and these are the words, then I wouldn't be in favor of it.
yeah, I mean, I'm fine with the rest of section 3. I mean, it's asking for an incentive to adopt it and the extra funding. I just don't think we should be in the business of asking the state to cut the town meeting out of the process of adopting these things.
Nor should we be asking the state to mandate things that don't stand on economic merits. That's what worries me when things like this go up to the state. What it's asking for is the state to what it may ask for is the state to dictate things, whether they make economic sense or not. And the state already is good at doing that. We don't need to help them.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything like that in here, Gus. I mean, as I said, that's the only issue I had with. I mean, mostly it's asking the state for more money for municipalities to help them do these things. That was the only objection I had. It's just I don't want to advocate for asking the state to help us bypass our own town charter and our own legislative
maybe
process.
I can read to Gus what it actually says. Sorry, Fred. The actual ask is so that the communities, if we sign on, the communities ask the Commonwealth to update the 2030 CECP to clarify the process of green communities that they must take to adopt the proposed high-performance stretch code, and request a provision that gives the chief municipal executives, that's you, in the green communities, the authority to opt in.
Right, to bypass town meeting.
So if I may, Mike, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't mean to be argumentative, but the way I read that paragraph, I saw actually a complaint that all green communities share, which is that there is that the situation is less than clear. They quote, green communities have already agreed to adopt, quote, any future additions, amendments, or modifications thereto, and then that's the end of the quote, established through the BBRS update process. In other words, it's an ambiguous situation. And if you all remember, as we adopted the stretch code, they're acknowledging right here in this paragraph that does that mean we adopt new stretch codes as they come out? If anybody here is totally clear, if town council is totally clear on this, that'd be great. But I think this paragraph here is complaining that there's some lack of clarity around this particular question, and this should get clarified.
Well, that's, I mean,
think we'd
I don't
agree
want to
about the
argue about,
clar-
I don't want to argue about this paragraph, Fred. I think my reading of it is the plain English reading of what it says, and it's fine if that's what you want to do. It says they request a provision that gives the chief municipal executive in a green community the authority to opt in, which is that the board of selectmen would decide to adopt it and not the town meeting. Now, if the question was, we want to clarify whether the vote of the town meeting to adopt the stretch code in the first instance was binding on all future town meetings, that's what the question would say. But the paragraph characterizes the need to quote, adopt a new code as a general ordinance via city council or as a bylaw through a vote of town meeting. It characterizes that process, again, the local legislative process, as a local legislative burden. And to remove that local legislative burden as part of the opt-in process to further increase the speed of widespread code adoption. Again, I have no issue if there's an open legal question about whether the town meeting that adopted the stretch code has therefore bound future town meetings. In general, as I understand it, town meetings can't bind future town meetings unless it's to a charter or a bylaw adoption. And so if that's the rule and that's the local rule, that's what we should follow. And again, it's not any objection to the stretch code. It's acting in defense of our local legislative process. That's all. And so, as I said, I'd sign the letter without that paragraph. But I mean, it sounds like Gus has to read it anyway. And if we're not allowed to sign the letter unless we accept that paragraph, then I'd be happy to send a separate letter without that paragraph from the town.
Hilly, would that be helpful tonight?
I mean, it wouldn't be part of the multi-town letter, but I think it would be good if the select board was supporting a letter.
Within the state's time frame?
Right. I think the next select board meeting is on the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be late, but.
So how about if we do that, we send the letter without that paragraph that you're citing in the bullet item number 3, Mike, as long as Gus doesn't object to the letter once he's had a chance to review it by Friday or something of that sort?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm happy to put myself on a deadline of Friday to review the letter. Yeah, Christine, it would be useful for me to review the letter that we're actually sending. I already have the start and I've heard this conversation. I'd like to see the letter that I would be not objecting to, but I'm fine with that.
I mean, and look, and not that we want to send this letter, outvoting Gus, but if Pete and I vote to send the letter without the paragraph, that's a majority of the board, and Gus can decide whether he signs it or not.
If you want me to, if the two of you would like to do that, I will not hate you forever because I haven't read the letter and I've been skiing while you all have been working. So I'm quite happy to be at. I will abstain on the vote, but I will not hold it against you if you've read it, you've seen it, you've heard the conversations, and I trust the two of your judgment, especially when it's united in opposition to anything I might think. So, if you're comfortable doing that, I will merely abstain today without prejudice.
Well, that's the kind of statement, Gus, that gets read back at you when you're testifying at trial. Didn't you say that you trusted both of our judgments at 8:52 p.m. on March 16th?
Only on weeks that I've been skiing.
Right. So I would move then that the board sign onto this letter with the deletion of the third paragraph of section 3 that begins the communities and authorize.
They all begin with the communities. So the communities also seek to remind DOER how challenging.
Yes, how hard it is to legislate. And anyway, we don't need to remind them of that. We know the challenges of it and respect the process. So with the deletion of the third paragraph of section 3, vote to authorize the board to sign it, and Selectman Murphy will decide whether he adds a signature or not at some point between now and Friday.
Okay, so part of this is if I do like the letter, I'll let you know and you can add my signature to it. That's
otherwise,
Yep, that works.
You can file a dissenting opinion with the letter.
I will still abstain on this vote, but I am quite happy with that condition.
Right.
I'll second that then.
All right, Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
Mr. Marcucci, yes, and Mr. Murphy
Abstain without prejudice.
All right.
If I could just add a comment, I think it will need to be edited because of course it says communities. We're going to have to insert Medfield every time it says communities.
Okay.
And then in that whole section 3, I think we'll have to, I don't know if there's any ask then in there, because if you're taking out the whole third paragraph.
No, we're asking for money. We're still asking for money. We're still asking
we asked to partner with
recommend a
DOER.
pool of grant money be made available exclusively to green communities who adopt the high performance energy structure. We're happy to ask for money.
Yeah,
that's an ask right there.
So I don't know if Christine would be able to edit it or if I should.
No, I'll take care of it for you.
All right. Well, I thank you to the board and to the administration, to Christine and Nick to have us here.
Thank you both.
Thank you for coming, guys.
Thank you very much.
So back to my agenda then, discussion. Anything, Chris, for any of the 3 topics there, COVID status?
Yes, a couple of things. Nick, can you just bring up the CARES funding that we had last night? Sorry.
I hear we got
didn't talk
over
about
$1 million.
Yeah, give me a sec. I'll grab it.
Okay. Well, I want to wrap up and talk about our CARES funding that we received last year.
Okay.
We have an estimate on that, and then we can talk about the ARP funding, which is what everybody appears to be calling it now, in terms of the information that I sent over the weekend. So actually, why don't we just let's do the ARP first. I think you're ready for that one. Oh.
Sorry, too late. I grabbed it.
You're already back. So I just wanted to wrap up. I know Mike got a chance to see this at the warrant committee last night, and I did send to Pete and Gus over the weekend, but this is where we are in terms of the CARES funding that we received. We've also included the FEMA money that we were eligible for as the town, and some additional COVID-19 funding that went directly to the schools. I should say in doing this, I left off, there were, I believe, 2 small grants we received from the Department of Public Health. I think they were less than $15,000 to assist in our contact tracing. But we did receive that under DPH CARES money as well. But at this point, we have spent the $1.3 million. It's broken down here for you. As you know, we had specific rules in how we were spending this. So we had a process in place. This had to be specific COVID eligible expenses. It focused a lot on personnel and getting everybody for remote learning, remote work. It's hard to remember that none of us knew what Zoom was back in March and April, and we got this money in order to provide all of these Zoom accounts for the town. We also had to make sure that none of this money had been budgeted. So this was additional COVID expenses that were outside of our fiscal year 21 budget. So I just wanted to wrap that up for you, and we'll post this on the website so everybody can see how we expended this amount of funds that came in last year. And then the second part of the discussion, I just wanted to make you aware, I know I did send it to everybody, and everybody did email me over the weekend some suggestions for how they wanted to spend the money. But the ARP money we are eligible to receive, it looks like 1.28 million was the estimate. We don't have specific rules from the Treasury yet. We have some, I think, vague guidance on what we can spend. They also have been clear that the money can't be spent to do a tax cut. So we're hoping that within the next week, we will have specific rules from the Treasury, how we can actually spend this going into fiscal year 22. So I don't know if you want to have a discussion about this tonight. We can hold until next week, but I wanted to put this on everybody's radar.
So I would say for me, I mean, I have thoughts on it, but it's probably make more sense to have the discussion once we know what the rules are.
I think so too.
And so that we're kind of, we know what the parameters are, and we can discuss within those.
Perfect.
I would agree with that. I'll make one comment, and I pass this on to Christine. At first blush, when money like this comes to the town, I think people's minds go immediately to, oh, this is more money that's available to the town, the schools to fund our budgets. And as I read the guidance at this level of generality, I recognize that in addition to funding town, town operations, school operations, this actually appears to have opened up the possibility of doing something to support businesses, small businesses in town. And I realize that it's not a giveaway to small businesses in town, but it may be that there's more things like the picnic tables we put up, or who knows what, that it falls outside of normal town operations, school operations, but gets at the business community. And then the other item was item 4 here, which raised this idea of infrastructure to include water and sewer infrastructure. And I'm not arguing that money has to go anywhere. I'm just saying, as I was reading this, I kind of in my head said, gee, there's actually 3 categories of potential things that this funding could be pushed toward, that I should be thinking about. It's not just an automatic, how is this going to help our budget in FY22?
Well, we're anticipating, considering the first round of funding is supposed to be within the first 60 days, we're hoping within the next week or so to have the regulations, or at least a hint of what the regulations will be in more specific terms than what they've sent so far. So hopefully we'll have an update shortly.
All right, so we'll get back to that when we've got more information. Fiscal year 2022 operating and capital budgets, financial policies. Anything there?
No, we're still holding, we still have a $421,000 difference between, in order to balance the budget for fiscal year 22. The warrant committee will be taking it up and discussing it again on Thursday. They have a special meeting on Thursday this week. And they will continue to try and develop scenarios for how we can meet that balanced budget.
Okay. Anything about the town meeting?
No, I will have, we're almost completed a full draft of the town meeting warrant articles, and I'll have that out to you in a couple of days.
Great.
I think Mark's reviewing that right now, right, Mark?
Action items, open the annual town meeting warrant.
Yes, I would like to request that you open the 2021 annual town meeting warrant to be closed at the end of the meeting tonight. There is a warrant article that I would like to add on behalf of the selectmen that we did not consider before we closed the warrant in February.
Do we have a motion to open the annual town meeting warrant?
I would move that we open the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.
And Mr. Marcucci, yes.
Yep.
So the fiscal 22 health insurance rate renewal.
Yes. So this is our annual health insurance renewal. I know we've been talking about it. We did not have the official paperwork yet. This will be a reduction of 0.60% for the town and our employees. And they have also, I know I talked about it at our last meeting, they have also offered a healthcare holiday, premium holiday, which will be this fall. So there'll be a 1 month holiday premium as well. And these rates have been submitted to the Health Insurance Advisory Committee, and they were favorable to them as well, obviously.
It's just astonishing because those rates used to go up 10, 15%, it seems to be at one point. So,
well, I think the reduction is based on the amount of healthcare people are utilizing within this COVID year. And that's why we saw, a healthcare premium holiday last year and one this year. I don't anticipate this will be what we anticipate for next year.
It's been an odd year for sure.
We need a motion on this one, Christine?
I do. I need a motion to authorize you, to authorize me to sign it.
So I would move that we authorize the town administrator, Christine Truweiler, to sign the fiscal year 2022 health insurance rate renewal.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.
And Mr. Marcucci, yes.
And next is memorandum of agreement with the Medfield Police League, Chris.
I'm actually going to ask that we hold this until next week. We had
Okay.
some finalizing of the details, so we didn't get it in the packet in time, and I want everybody to have a chance to have seen it in the packet.
Okay. Nothing on the consent agenda. Oh, we need to close the annual town meeting.
We have another update.
Oh,
In red on here is the request from the Massachusetts Canine Response Team to request the use of Medfield State Hospital for canine search and rescue training.
Yes. So I met with two of the women who run this organization. They are most often called out by the state police, and they do dog training all over the state. And they thought the Medfield State Hospital was a perfect place for them to do some live training with the dogs inside the buildings. I talked to John, who had no issue with it, and he can coordinate some dates with them. I explained to them we couldn't close the campus. There would be dogs and people walking, and they said that's actually beneficial to them to be able to walk dogs through a live scene. So they were happy about us not closing it. So I would ask that we waive the licensing fee for this. They're a nonprofit organization, and we would be able to utilize them if we ever had an issue like this. So similar to our state police training, I would request that we waive that. They will sign the license agreement, and they have their own insurance that they will forward to us as well.
That works for me.
Good.
Chris, how often are they going to be using it?
Right now, it looks like they're just going to have one training this year.
Okay.
We'll do it later in the spring.
Do they, I'm just curious, when they do that, do they, yeah, they're obviously not going to put a body in a building, but like, how do they, is it like the Norfolk Hunt Club with their fox scent, that, how does that work?
So they actually explained to me that they do bring blood on scene, and they have different training modules, whether or not they're looking to rescue somebody who is still alive or somebody who is deceased, and the material they use differs based on that. But they assured me that they will clean it up and you will never know that they had blood within the buildings.
Yeah, and I assume they're committing, if they find any urban spelunkers down in our steam tunnels, they'll flush them out for us. Okay.
They are fascinated by what they've seen up there. So
I bet.
That's great. And this is exciting too, Christine, because I believe, if I'm correct, these are in fact the only dogs in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who have not yet been to Medfield State Hospital. So we'll have now covered every single dog in Massachusetts will now have been there at some point. So this is very exciting to complete that.
very true.
Chris,
Yeah.
maybe you could ask them to put a GoPro on the dog so that we could get a good movie of what they do. So do we have a motion then?
Yes, I would move that we authorize the the Massachusetts Canine Response Team to use Medfield State Hospital for canine search and rescue training, and to waive the standard licensing fee, subject to their signing the standard license agreement for the use of the hospital and the buildings.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
Mr. Murby.
Aye.
And Mr. Marcucci, aye.
Okay, now are we ready to close the annual town meeting warrant?
Yes. Well, we have to add the article, don't we? Or do we have to actually say what we're adding, or is it just open it and then?
We don't normally, but I'm more than happy to tell everybody that.
No, that's fine. I didn't remember if you had to, you can just add it. It was added, it floated into the warrant while we were talking, and then it's just.
It was in the.
I would suggest that the better practice would be to identify the additional.
I'm adding a warrant article that addresses a non-union retroactive stipend for our frontline employees.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, then I would move that we close the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.
And Mr. Marcucci, yes.
We've got nothing in our consent agenda, nothing in our citizen comment, town administrator update, nothing listed.
I don't have anything this evening.
Okay. Next meeting dates, every week, and we seem to have April 1st as well.
April 1st is the warrant hearing, which you are not obligated to attend because it's not being held as a joint meeting. It's just being held as the warrant.
Okay.
And I will not be attending, Christine, just FYI.
I'm going to be spending April Fool's Day with the warrant committee. It seems very appropriate.
Let's see, Selectmen reports then. Gus, anything from the ski
Conditions
slopes?
been great, but I think about the only thing that I'm aware of in the last week that's gone on is that the development committee is in the process of coming up with the third draft of the RFP. I did have some communications with Todd, and I know Pat Casey has as well. So I think they're still on schedule to come in next meeting to present that third draft.
Okay. Mike?
A couple of things. School building committee met last Wednesday. A lot of discussions about sort of the technical layouts of the building and the size of gyms and bleachers and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's going to be a joint meeting next week again on net zero and energy issues. Affordable Housing Trust Board met on Thursday night for about 3 hours to talk about the two RFPs that were the finalists for the Hinckley South senior housing development. And both developers were interviewed. We had comments from some neighbors and abutters to the property. And there was a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Trust Board to recommend the Medfield Holdings proposal, the Bob Borelli proposal. And I think my hope is, because Pete is recused from this one, that this will be on the agenda for Gus and I next Tuesday, the 23rd, to award that. And then there'll be a negotiation of a PNS and then a LIP agreement, and they'll go into the LIP process after that. And last night I was at the warrant committee meeting, mostly just to discuss the capital budget items and all that kind of stuff. So it was a special guest appearance at the warrant committee last night. So I think that's all that I have.
And for me, it was just the energy committee last Thursday. And they just have fingers in lots of pots everywhere now. Nothing special to bring back to you guys. So are we ready to adjourn then? Anything informational? Gatsby, I see. OPEB liability, financial statements.
I guess I could
auditors.
comment on OPEB, the right up there. The OPEB committee, I don't have the exact date, but somewhere in the next month, the OPEB committee will be meeting. We'll be reviewing that. And I would expect, as I have done in the past, to give you a summary of kind of where we're at in terms of liabilities. I think you'll see it if you haven't read that report. And interestingly, I went through the accountant's report and realized that some of that information is actually also effectively contained in there. But a broad statement that I'll make is that when we first started looking at the OPEB liability, our unfunded total liability it was either 42 or $44 million.
It was 44.
44 million, and that's come down about $10 million in terms of the total projected liability as a function of the steps that we've taken to establish the trust, adjustments that the actuaries have made on assumed discount rates and things like that. So we've put in upwards of $3 million against that, what looked like 44 million, but actually because of the adjustments that have been made, we're actually more like 10% of having fully, it's only a start, but we're at about 10% of having fully funded our current projected long-term liability. So it's partly why I've been cautious about not just jumping whole hog on what the annual contributions were that we had in those early calculations, because we've actually made more progress based on changing assumptions even than we have in terms of the actual money we put against things. I don't think we're putting too much in by any means, but I'll have a more coherent and detailed explanation of where we stand for you shortly.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised and pleased in reading that report. Yeah. So I would
go ahead.
I was just going to move that we adjourn.
Yeah, that's where I was asking.
Second.
Mr. Peterson.
Yep.
Mr. Murby.
Yes.